Fabulous. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is our first virtual roundtable of 2026 for the Creating Change Network. Um, I think most folks know, but in case you don't, the Creating Change Network is a program of the New Jersey Theater Alliance in partnership with Art Pride New Jersey and led by a steering committee of arts leaders and social justice leaders across the state, with the goal to really help move the arts community forward in terms of equity, justice, anti-racism, accessibility, and anti-oppression across the board. Um, and we are so grateful to our funders, the Grunin Foundation and the Stone Foundation of New Jersey, who make our work possible. And the Creating Change Network, we do an in-person event in the fall. We do virtual offerings in the spring. And this year, everything that we're offering in the spring really came out of the conversations in the fall, where we held an emergent strategy session to really surface what was on the minds and hearts of the arts community. And so today is you can draw a direct line back to that that afternoon and what we heard and what people were hoping to continue in terms of learning and partnership. So I'm so excited for this morning. This is a really incredible group of folks that you're going to hear from. And what I'm going to do is I'll introduce our incredible moderator, Maria Carnemolla, and I will spotlight her, and then I will spotlight the full panels so that you're not, seeing yourselves the whole time. And then we'll get the conversation started, and there will be opportunities for questions at the end. I'll also be monitoring the chat, so please feel free to put any questions or comments or anything in there. Okay. I'm so happy to introduce Maria Carnemolla. She is the executive director of Gathering Ground, which I think many of you have engaged with over the years. She has over 25 years of leadership experience working in higher education and nonprofit organizations. She's dedicated her life and is deeply committed to working on transforming and challenging structures that perpetuate inequality and promoting and creating more equitable democratic communities that put people and their needs before profits. Maria holds a BA in economics from the University of Massachusetts Amherst and an MS in management from the College of St. Elizabeth in Morristown, New Jersey. She currently lives in Woodland Park, New Jersey, with her husband and 2 children and 1 fur baby. So let me get you spotlit.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'm excited for today. I want to thank Erica and thank the New Jersey Theater Alliance for organizing this incredible panel and discussion and for trusting me to facilitate this conversation. So welcome to all of you. The arts and art spaces have always been more than just venues for exhibition and performance. They're breeding grounds and laboratories for imagination. They're places where we practice asking, what if and what could be? But before we can build a more just world, I think we all agree we have to start by imagining it. And that's the work that artists and creative communities do every single day. But imagination without connection is simply not enough. It's just dreaming. The connection between art and social justice isn't just a coincidence, it's necessary. Both require us to see what others might miss, to center the voices of those that have been marginalized, and to make the invisible visible. Both demand that we sit with discomfort, challenge assumptions, and refuse to accept that the way things are is the way they must be. The arts community has resources, spaces, platforms, skills in storytelling and community engagement, networks, and probably most importantly, practice in holding complexity and nuance. But resources without relationships can at times do more harm than good. And that is why we're here today. Not to talk about what the arts can do for social justice movements, but to listen and to learn about what these movements actually need, what meaningful partnerships look like, and how we can show up in ways that are truly useful rather than extractive or performative. Today's panelists are leaders working on the front lines of environmental justice, workers' rights, criminal justice reform, and trans equity here in New Jersey. They're going to help us understand their priorities, their visions, and how cross-sector collaborations can either harm, undermine, or strengthen their work. So I invite all of us here today to listen deeply, to question your assumptions, and to think critically about how your creativity and your resources might be used in service of movements that are led by those most impacted by injustice. I'm honored to present to you our panel for today. We have Nuzhat Chowdhury, Oriana Holmes Price, Julia Ortiz, and Nathan Rodriguez. Nuzhat Chowdhury is the Director of Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. Previously, Nuzhat worked at the Brennan Center for Justice, the New York City Council, where she helped draft and pass laws meant to protect marginalized New Yorkers. During her time in law school, Nuzhat participated in the Columbia Human Rights Clinic, interned with the Legal Resource Center in Cape Town, South Africa, and was a teaching and writing fellow with the Columbia Foundation's Moot Court program. Nuzhat will be serving on the Government Ethics and State Affairs Committee for the New York City Bar Association for the upcoming term 2022-2025. Oriana Holmes Price serves as the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance as the Director of Organizing, prioritizing community engagement, public education, and statewide and national coalition management. Working most recently as the External Affairs Coordinator for an offshore wind developer, Oriana sharpened her skills in strategic stakeholder engagement and public affairs, building successful statewide relationships and partnerships. Oriana previously served as a student activist, leading the New Jersey Public Interest Research Group as the state board chair. She is currently pursuing her master's degree in public affairs and community development at Rutgers Camden. Julia Ortiz is a bilingual immigration organizer with New Labor, where among many other projects, she spearheads La Mafia Naranja, a social theater space that used both internally to work with member leaders and externally at conferences and public events in bilingual spaces based on the theater of the oppressed. And lastly, Nathan Rodriguez is a transgender man who has been transitioning since 2011. He achieved his BA from Montclair State University with the major in women, gender, and sexuality studies in 2013, and has been working professionally in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for over a decade. He served for 2 years on Essex County's LGBT plus advisory board and is currently a member for the LGBT plus resource group of a Fortune 100 company, where he continues to advocate and make an impact on the cultural competency in the corporate sphere. Welcome, Julia, Oriana, Nathan, and Nuzhat. We're excited to have you here today. And I'm just going to, before we start with the questions, I just want to ask each of you to just briefly tell us about your organization and maybe highlight 2 or 3 priorities that your organizations are focusing on. And I'm going to start with Nuzhat because she's the first one I see, if that's okay.
Of course. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me on this panel. I'm really excited to have the conversation today. I'm Nuzhat Chowdhury. I'm the director of the Democracy and Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. We are a legal and legislative advocacy organization that works through a couple of different programmatic areas to try and empower Black and Brown communities, specifically in New Jersey. So we do work in criminal justice reform, in economic justice reform, environmental justice reform, which is our newest programmatic area, and democracy and justice. We also do reparations work to see what reparative justice would look like for Black communities here in New Jersey. And we explore and we push forward legislation and policies through campaign work, through community engagement, through education work, and through going to the State House and pushing legislators to be better than they are.
Thank you, Nuzat. Oriana, could I ask you to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. So you heard a little bit about me. I'm at the New Jersey Environmental Justice Alliance. We are an alliance of New Jersey-based organizations. We've been around for the last 2 decades or so, just about as long as I've been alive, doing great work around the state to identify, prevent, reduce, and eliminate environmental injustice, particularly in Black and Brown communities, low-income communities, and our Indigenous communities. Um, we do a lot of advocacy, policy work, lots of education, technical assistance, really are the supportive arm to community. However, they need us to show up. We show up with them, working on the front and fence lines of many different environmental injustices across the state related to air pollution, energy, waste justice, sports and goods movement. So thinking about the way that things are kind of moving across the state to power our daily lives. And we're doing a lot of work right now around data centers, which I'll touch on a little bit throughout the panel.
Thank you, Oriana. Definitely something I'm interested in learning more about. So thank you. Julia, could I ask you to go next, please? Thank you.
Yes. Hi everyone. So, New Labor is a labor organization that we organize workers uh, to educate them to exercise the rights in their workplace. And the majority of our members are Hispanic, from the Hispanic community. So we usually do, we work with popular education as our tool for them to empower them to understand that they have the abilities um, and the knowledge to empower themselves and defend their rights, not only the labor rights, but also as a member of the community.
Thank you, Julia. Nathan, that leaves you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm the executive director for Trans Equity Coalition. We are a grassroots 501c3 nonprofit that is exclusively run and facilitated by people of the gender diverse community. Our mission really is to improve the quality of life for trans and gender diverse people across the state of New Jersey. We offer really imperative resources, everything from support groups, not just for trans people, but we also offer support groups for parents and families of trans people who are trying to transition together and gain a social support network. We also offer direct impact aid. One of our most crucial programs is called our STAR program, which is how we put funds and resources directly into the hands of trans people. We can get them everything from grocery gift cards, gas cards, help them pay for prescription medications. We also offer free toiletry bags for folks who are displaced. And we also do a lot of community advocating, educating for everyone, with whether it's in social spheres, access to healthcare, and a lot of really other important and pressing matters in our community that I'm sure that we're going to be discussing shortly.
Thank you, Nathan. As an organization, Gathering Ground is an organization that really cares about cross-sector partnerships, and we consider ourselves a social justice convener. So to be among you four is just truly an incredible opportunity, and I'm excited about hearing from all of you. So I'm going to start with the first question, and really the topic is about what's at stake right now in New Jersey. So if I would like to ask the four of you if you could just tell us what is one urgent issue your community is facing in New Jersey right now and what you want more people to understand. And this time I'll let you choose
Yeah,
who's going.
I don't mind jumping in first.
Okay, great.
One of the most pressing issues that our community is facing, although there are many, ever since, certain political events were kind of public enemy number one in a lot of spheres. And transgender healthcare in specific is really under attack right now. I think that it's imperative for people to understand the realities of what trans healthcare is, how it's accessed, and why it matters. I think a lot of people are led to believe that this is new, that it's experimental, I think people are led to believe that you can just walk into any doctor's office and say, "Hey, I want to make some changes," and they say, "Go ahead, jump on the table. We're gonna do a million things." As somebody who has been transitioning for 2011, sometimes I wish it was that easy. The hoops that I had to jump through to get doctors to even acknowledge me, much less treat me, is widely misunderstood. Um, and it's also imperative for people to understand that although trans people are only 1%, estimated of the population, gender affirming care is something that benefits everyone. So if you are assigned female at birth, and let's say you go through menopause and you need hormone treatment to balance out, that is gender affirming care. If you're assigned male at birth and you have low testosterone that is causing things like weight gain or lethargy, and your doctor says, well, we're going to give you some testosterone boosts to try to level you out, that is gender affirming care. Rhinoplasties and breast implants and hair plugs, all of that is accessible readily to cisgender people. Now that people are understanding that it benefits the trans community, now there's been this like screeching halt and pushback, of why should my tax dollars pay for these types of things, or why should you have access to this if it goes against my personal beliefs. And what people don't realize is that gender affirming care was not built for trans people, and it's not new. This is something that, if revoked or if blocked, we all suffer together. So really just putting some understanding out there about the realities of what is on the line here, and understanding why it matters that we fight for equitable and accessible healthcare.
Thank you, Nathan.
I can jump in next. I think one of the things that one of the issues that New Jersey is facing, and it's not particularly unique because everyone right now is facing it, is our democracy is very much under attack right now, right? We see that on a federal level. We have the Supreme Court is piece by piece gutting away the Federal Voting Rights Act, which is the federal legislation from which we get a lot of our voting protections, a lot of the language access work that we have during elections, from election to election. We have executive orders coming from the White House right now, which is trying to make voting harder or trying to make the census count more incomplete. And all of these things, of course, impact everyone across the board. But I think one of the things that we don't realize in New Jersey is that those impacts are felt even in a state like New Jersey that generally speaking has good, quote unquote, like great democratic policies, very progressive policies, a state where I think it's not usually that voting is not usually seen as a particular problem, especially when, you're sitting here comparing it to states in the deep South that have much more apparent and obvious voter suppression laws. And I think to an extent, some of that is true. In terms of democratic policies, New Jersey isn't the worst that it could be. But definitely New Jersey voters do not have equal access to democracy across the state. There are certain communities where that face chronic challenges every single time that they go to the polls or every single time that they go to vote by mail. Largely, these communities tend to be in deep cities, urban areas. They tend to be Black and Brown communities, which are disproportionately impacted the most. And what we see happening from election cycle to election cycle is that once these chronic barriers sort of build up, voters in these communities in particular become either completely disillusioned with the system, they stop voting, or if they go to vote, they're not able to cast their vote and have their voices heard. And there are a lot of policies that New Jersey can put in place to help those voters, to protect those voters. But I think we have to start at a place where we're reckoning with the reality that New Jersey does not have a perfect democracy, and we need to be protecting our voters from the challenges that they face sort of here on the ground level in New Jersey, but also from a lot of the attacks that we're seeing from the federal level, which will come here and fall on the backs of voters. So, you have like the SAVE Act from the federal level, you have the MEGA Act, all of these different pieces of federal legislation that would make voting harder, especially for voters of color, for women voters, for voters who are in the minority. But then you even have these policies that are coming through that you don't think about very much. So I mentioned the census. One of the ways in which we get a complete count in the census and from which we get funding from the federal level and from the state level is to make sure every single person is counted regardless of immigration status. What the federal administration is now trying to do is to narrow that definition so that only citizens and LPR legal permanent residents are counted in the census. New Jersey would be directly impacted by that because if that were to go into effect, then New Jersey would lose a congressional seat, which means that we would have less representation in the federal government, which impacts us in a lot of the ways that I've spoken about. But I think that is one of the things that we need to reckon with here is that just because we have a good enough democracy does not mean that that is evenly felt, and that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be shoring it up through any means possible, especially right now.
Thank you, Nuzat. And I also I think, it's important to remember that we're not immune or isolated from the ripple effects of what happens in other states. And so thank you for that.
Yeah, along the same lines, Maria, I think that that's a perfect way to sum it up. I know I just mentioned data centers, and that's the biggest thing that's top of mind for me right now, top of mind for many of us working in the environmental justice and environmental conservation space right now. There's so many issues, so many things, so many tangents that we could go down around what's at stake right now, particularly for our frontline and fence line communities when we're thinking about environmental justice. But I think data centers are one of the topics that I think really kind of challenges the way that we're thinking about environmental justice right now, because we as a statewide organization, we focus both on our urban communities, but also our rural communities, which tend to get left out of the conversation a lot. And data centers are really cropping up in these more rural communities, taking up a lot of agricultural space, particularly down in Vineland. We're seeing them come into urban communities like in New Brunswick, which was just successfully defeated the other week, which was great. But data centers are coming everywhere for every community in New Jersey, across our electricity grid. So we're on a regional grid, PJM, which is shared across many different states. So we're trying to figure out right now, what does it look like to actually have an effective regional coalition around data centers that touches all of our communities here in New Jersey, but also folks in Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, who we all are on the same electricity grid. So even if we stop data centers here, folks in other states still need our support because we're also feeling the impact of those data centers going up, and vice versa. So I think that's the biggest issue we have right now. Not only is it taking up all of our space, but when we're thinking about the way it's depleting our clean drinking water, they can only operate on fresh drinking water. So that's a huge concern for many of us, especially because New Jersey is in the drought again. And even though we've gotten tons of snow, that's great, but that doesn't actually amount to enough water for our environment. And so really thinking about, what does it mean when we have even one huge data center coming up that's 37 acres in Vineland that could be drinking, millions of gallons of water every day when our state is struggling, right, to make sure that we can actually have clean water in our homes, where we're having water advisories that's, don't water your lawns at certain times of the year, take less showers, reduce your water consumption. But we have these huge data centers that are going up, literally swallowing up gallons of water. Also thinking about our electricity, we as the ratepayers are going to feel the direct impacts of these data centers going up across our regional grid. And so thinking about the ways that we can try and protect ourselves right now, it's very hard in New Jersey because we are a home rule state, which means a lot of these decisions have to happen at the local level. It's very hard to have blanket statewide policy that can be enacted and cover every data center, every warehouse. You really have to fight these at the local level every time they come up. So it's a lot of capacity that goes into this. So I think this is the biggest, most pressing issue we have right now, because it's coming for every community. It's coming for all of our resources. And it really is a very, very hyper-local fight against every single data center that tries to come up in New Jersey.
Thank you, Ariana. I have some thoughts, but I want to let Julia answer the question as well, because I'm already seeing interconnection among the three of you. And so I know Julia with the lens on workers' rights will also have something to share that's connected to the other three issues we heard about.
Yeah, actually, the first word I thought was under attack, and all of us use it. So, um, well, there are many situations that we like that become normalized in this system, but the immigration situation that we like encounter as organizers is it's very difficult, and it's not just like a cool scene, in the middle of a movie. It's something that makes us think about what's our sense of humanity now. So humanity is like in difficult times, difficult moments, and um, like when I think of the words under attack, I think it means like excessive prices. The housing is not affordable for our communities. Families are ripped apart due to immigration policies. Those are things that are happening here in New Jersey. Single moms that doesn't have access to uh, resources. So and that make us think, in labor, we've been putting all these things on the table, and what is our responsibility, to improve the situation, and that will force us, to take other positions that may not be comfortable, but they're necessary. So that's that's like the things that are worrying, and all the things that you mentioned before that affects to the housing and the prices of the food, all the immigration policies, like they're all interconnected. So it
Yeah.
is great that we can have this space, to put all those things on the table and see how we can reimagine like other interactions and other systems.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree that, and we talked about this right before everyone joined about New Jersey and how diverse New Jersey is, North, Central, and South Jersey. But I think, and whether we're talking about differences, race, gender, etc., we all have shared material conditions that we live in, right? We have issues with housing and affordability and healthcare and clean water and education. So these are all definitely interconnected, which all of you already have highlighted. So thank you for that. We're here to talk about meaningful partnerships. So I'd love to hear from you. What does a meaningful partnership look like to your organization versus just performative allyship? Because that is definitely something that causes more harm. So we want to learn about ways that we can benefit and support the organizations and the work that you're doing.
Go ahead, Nathan. Do you want to say something?
No, I went first last time. You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is a really great question. I think performative allyship is not something that's talked about too often, but it comes up a lot. And so I think this is really something like I would also put back on the participants here and like really deep reflection around how you show up in spaces, and what that means, because I think it's not only performative allyship, right? Sometimes it's selective allyship. And so figuring out like to who you are an ally to or are attempting to be an ally to, and to which communities are kind of willing to embrace you, right? I think that's the only way you could really be an ally is if that particular community is willing to say, okay, we see you, we recognize you as someone who's standing with us, and therefore you are an ally. Like that, I think we just have to have a general conversation around like what does a true ally actually look like, and how does that happen in partnership with community. But for NJEJA and the communities that we work with across the state, I think this meaningful partnership and participation really looks like, coming with our folks to different public hearings. There's a lot of hearings happening right now around the environmental justice law, around particular facilities that have permit renewals, And these are really, really important hearings for one, residents in these communities to show up, but also even all of you on this call to show up and say, this is why we need to put the onus back on the Department of Environmental Protection to have stricter guidelines and regulations around polluting facilities. Air pollution knows no boundaries. So even if a facility is located in a county, 50 miles away from you, if the wind is blowing a certain direction one day, you're also breathing in that same pollution. It might not be as strong, it might not have the same impacts, but you're also breathing in that air. Our water, we're all drinking that. And so, if there's hearing opportunities to give public comment, even written comment, tap in with us. We want you to show up. We want to help you show up. So we will help you write comments, help you understand what it looks like to tell your story. Just as a New Jersey resident, you don't have to know all the technical jargon, but really standing with our communities when these opportunities come up so that the Department of Environmental Protection and other government agencies actually take our feedback seriously. They need very specific comments, unfortunately, sometimes to actually be able to do something about a particular issue. So I think that's one way that's somewhat of a low lift. And we're willing to help you with that lift, but to show up in this space and be a meaningful partner.
Thank you, Ariana. I mean, I'd love to learn more about ways. I know you mentioned the data centers and the importance of local activism. So I'd love for you, even if share after this discussion, but share ways in which we can do that, and seek out your help to do that at the local level. So thank you.
I definitely can piggyback off of what you were saying too about like that selective allyship because we see that a lot in our community. Talking about transgender issues is wildly uncomfortable for far too many people. I think that for me, I love the famous Jimi Hendrix quote of like knowledge speaks, but wisdom listens, right? So if you're coming to the table, first of all, coming to the table at all is imperative, but we only grow when we challenge ourselves. So instead of coming in and saying like, how do I use the right pronouns? What do I say when my person says this? What do I, just come to the table and sit and don't say anything. Listen to the experiences of the people that are struggling with this issue instead of constantly trying to come and take up space and talk about why you're a great ally and you're such a good person, you're trying and you suck at the pronoun thing and everybody jumps down your throat. Like, don't make it about you. Come and break bread with some people that you wouldn't every single day and just listen to their stories. And you're going to find the humanity in it. You're going to find the ties that tether you back to your own experiences and your stories. And you're going to see that there's a lot more overlap and commonality than there are differences. And kind of going off of some of that selective allyship, I certainly see a lot of people that I think are well-meaning in a way. They're trying to come into the space and they're trying to learn. But they'll make comments to me of like, well, I like talking to you because, like you are an agreeable person. I misgendered somebody, they jumped down my throat, they like screamed at me, and I don't want to deal with them. And I always bring those people back to the perspective of like, that might have been your first time misgendering this person. You might have said the wrong pronoun and then they flipped out on you and you feel like, oh my God, what have I really done to you with one time? To that person, that was probably like the 100th time that day that they got misgendered, and how painful that is and how annoying and exhausting it is. So you are not on an even playing field when you're having those types of interactions. Just have a little bit of grace and humility to like turn your gaze inward and think like, what am I doing or what am I not doing when I'm coming to these spaces, rather than coming in and saying like, hey, everybody, look at me. I'm this wonderful ally. Teach me more about this. Tell me this definition. Teach me this, when these are things you could be doing in your spare time. And then you can come to the table and have a deeper, meaningful conversation instead of expecting free emotional labor and endless patience while we continuously educate you on things that are available everywhere for free. So it's, yeah, just do some homework and like a little bit of soul searching before you come to that table. And I think you're going to get a lot farther than if you just come in and just start talking, instead of actually listening.
Thank you, Nathan.
That actually leads perfectly into what I have been thinking about during this conversation, which is that we need to make sure that we are approaching communities and spaces and not only uplifting their voices, but making sure that we aren't putting our own interpretations of that community's needs onto that community. I
Mhm.
think one of the really important parts of making sure that you are not just a performative ally is also making sure that you are not deciding for communities what is the most important to them. That might not look like what is most important to you or to your community, but it might be the reality of that particular community. So because I live in the democracy space, that really is my base of knowledge and example. But for example, when we talk to different voters or different folks from like Black and Brown communities, especially ones that are like deeply impoverished, or when we work in Newark, our office is based out of Newark. There are certain neighborhoods that when we have visited, when we've tried to engage voters, they've been very reticent to talk to us. Or they've been like, well, why would we vote? The people who are voted into power, they have nothing to do with us. Or they express a very deep skepticism of vote by mail. A lot of these policies that we are very much in support of because it grows democracy. It's good for us. It's good for voters. It's important that we meet those voters or those people where they're at in terms of their interaction with democracy, the deep distrust that they very, very reasonably might have among their communities for whatever it might be, for vote by mail, for voting in general. If we just go into those communities and we say, well, you need to vote, you need to go, like vote by mail is perfectly safe. It is so important that you vote. Like we're doing a disservice to our work, but we're also doing a disservice to that community because that is not where they are at right now. That is not what their need is right now. And so that's one of the things I would uplift is just making sure that when you go into spaces, when you are talking to communities, you are reflecting their needs and their history instead of imposing your own onto them.
Thank you. What I'm
Uh,
hearing is bottom up and community driven approach.
yeah, and if you're like seeking visibility or validation, you're totally a performative ally. It won't last, or you can also destroy
Mhm.
whatever the company is building. Well,
Right.
if a meaningful alliance seek like long-term impact, and I think you as an ally has to maybe question yourself to what's your privilege,
Mhm.
and if your privilege is real, because sometimes we talk about the because I have a privilege, there's some privileges that are real, that are very practical, but in this situation right now, this it's like you have to really question how long your privilege is gonna last, because the reality is that everyone is being affected. The immigration policies in the long term are going to affect other communities, not only immigrant communities.
Absolutely.
Uh, so I think that's like something that an ally can think like, okay, let's think through this situation. See, sometimes people think, well, I'm middle class, I'm not being affected by the economy or some decisions, but in real, in reality, you are, or you're going to, So, and we have to understand maybe you're not middle class, you're a working class, and how I can connect with that community, without, the judgment or prejudice or bias that you can have. And that's something that in labor we're trying to um, work with, because we have, the rapid response programs that are with the working with other organizations with the rapid response, and we've been having these contradictions, with the form of the way the ally come to our community. And we have to question that too. Like we have to connect as humans, as neighbors first, you know, and um, and then you can see like behind that privilege what really means to you, like work with the community.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. And I definitely think that, division is one of the tools that has been used, focusing on our differences to keep us apart, and understanding the importance of our shared humanity and finding common bonds through dialogue, through listening carefully and attentively, as Nathan had said, is so important to kind of break these barriers. Okay. I'd love to hear from you all when you think about cross-sector partners, which we all agree are super important with the work that we're doing. What kinds of support have actually helped to move your work forward? Or what do you envision if it hasn't happened yet? What do you envision are the kinds of support that can help move your work forward?
I think I'm a huge fan of organizations that have had the willingness to put on a different lens to the work that they do. Because I think that we might have this kind of broad expanse of the work that we want to do. And sometimes we forget that there's like silos, right? Because you were just talking about the division that is within our community when everybody's fighting for scraps, like everybody looks like an enemy. And it's very easy to get lost in thinking like, okay, who else is affected by this? So just using an example of somebody who works in housing justice, right? They're thinking, yeah, I'm helping to lessen the houseless population, but not necessarily looking through the silos of like what is causing displacement in this particular community or another. So when there are organizations that we've been able to work with to say, um, houselessness being a huge epidemic right now in the trans community, um, what's causing that? Um, a lot of times a person comes out and their parents kick them out of the house and say, I'm not going to have a trans child. You can just be out in the streets. They come out at work, and guess what? They start getting discriminated against. They start losing their jobs. They start not being eligible for promotion opportunities. The social impact starts to boost things like substance abuse, suicidal ideation. So instead of just looking at, okay, generally there's like X amount of displaced people, um, when they start looking at the why, or like how can I reach out to a specific community, whether it's looking at, and we do the same thing also. We're not just like looking as like everybody come help trans people, although like yes please do, but like where do I hold privilege? um I was born here, I speak the language, I'm Puerto Rican but I'm a white passing person, I'm trans but I'm a cis passing person. So looking at, well, where can I do some outreach here? So I might be presenting information about trans justice, but am I reaching Black and Brown communities? Am I reaching people who to whom English is not their first language? So when it comes to like the cross sector partnerships, start to look at what activism you're doing and just put on a different hat for a little bit of like, okay, if I'm working in food justice, have I reached people with disabilities? Have I reached elderly communities? Have I reached children? Have I reached people who are victims of sexual violence? Like just try some different hats and think, okay, if I'm doing this work, even if a bunch of people are showing up for it, are all those people within the same demographics? Are all those people who possibly would have had access anyway? If you're not seeing like, well, how can we get more Black viewership? How can we get people with disabilities to participate with these programs that can benefit them? Think about how can I reach that person? How can I meet them where they're at? How can I understand their specific needs? Kind of what like Nuzat was saying before of like, I'm going to ask you what your needs are. I'm not going to assume what your needs are in this conversation. You're going to see, I believe, a lot more success in that cross sector partnership because you're not just viewing it through the lens that you want to view it through or that you're kind of predisposed to view it through. You're going to start to see all of maybe your little blind spots that you probably didn't even realize that you had, and you're going to have a much wider net to reach people.
Thank you, Nathan.
I'm just gonna +1 that. I
Okay.
think that summed up everything that I was more or less gonna say as well. That was great. And definitely like very agreeable for all the work that we're doing in the EJ space, because that really does touch on so many different sectors. So yeah, just a +1 and uplifting like the intersectionality that all of this work has, and really like forcing us to focus on that. And there are people who will help you. So if you don't know where to start, like do your research, and there are people who will help you. So that is not an excuse. If you don't know, you better talk to someone, and we can help you talk to those people.
Thank you, Oriana.
I think also just piggybacking off of that, again, also very much +1. But one of the things that I think also is very important that comes with it is just realizing through this work that all of our issues are interconnected. We should all be showing up in all of these spaces to the extent that we can, because none of these issues exist in a vacuum. If I go to an immigration rally, I'm there supporting, that particular issue at that time, but that also very much interconnects with the democracy issues that I'm working on. It very much connects with criminal justice issues that maybe my colleague is working on. All of these issues are interconnected, and the way that we build people power is by showing up for each other at events, at different rallies, at different, speaking engagements, educational opportunities, and making sure that we are there supporting one another. Because I think one of the hardest things I'm sure for all of our groups is when we are trying to show up and pressure for a particular policy change or whatever it might be, there need to be bodies in the room. There need to be people there supporting that particular effort so that the people who are in power know that there is people power behind this. And so, one, just by showing up to these different events, you are helping show the power of the people and that these are very important issues to our communities. But also, you are in that space also learning about these different issues that maybe you are not familiar with. Again, when I go to an immigration rally, like that's not what I work on day in and day out. But at that rally, I can hear from different organizations, different groups, and really figure out what it is that that particular space is facing and what I can do to really help support it. So just adding that onto the general and very excellent discussion.
Yeah. Thank you, News. I definitely agree about nothing happens in a vacuum and we're all affected. Julia, if you want to say a few words, otherwise we can move to the next question, but I want to give you an opportunity to comment as well.
Yeah. So yeah, no, it's like we're not black, we're not white, we're not brown, we're all humans, and with a huge existential necessities that we have to we were not able to address because we're living in a society full of false illusions, oppression, power relationships, that create disadvantages. So for me, the real progress would be like understand that as a basic and overcome the segregation, and start building from the real resources that we've been creating in the middle of the struggles. That would be, yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. So we're talking about true allyship and what that means and meaningful cross-sector partnerships. So I'm curious to hear from you, what capacities do you wish more partners would bring? I think I heard bodies already, right? Bodies and numbers definitely are important, but what capacities other than that do you wish partners would bring, even if they don't see themselves as political or justice focused necessarily? Although I think we all agree that these are issues that are affecting all of us, whether or not you see yourselves or see them as political. So the question's around capacity.
Yeah, I mean, capacity looks different for everyone. I think we've all been kind of touching on it, like however you can show up, like that's step number one. even if it's just, giving like an hour of your time, like go to a rally. It's Black History Month. Go to some Black History events, right? When there's like Trans Day of Visibility, go out to events, like all the stuff that's happening around ICE. Go to Know Your Rights trainings, like show up. Democracy is ongoing in New Jersey. We have elections every year, so there's always opportunities to get involved there. Door knock, canvas, build your skills up in different ways, because then that allows you to show up in different spaces with different skills that your neighbors might not have, but you can train them, right? Like a train the trainer type of thing. Where you can teach your neighbors how to canvas, or start looking at how to run a mutual aid event, like even in your neighborhood, even something small. I did that with my neighbors during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, where we had like little gardens. So we're like, oh, who needs I have so many tomatoes. Like, I'm not going to do anything with these. Who needs these tomatoes? Who needs this? Who needs that? So, we all have different capacities and ways that we can show up in different spaces. And the more you're going and taking the opportunity to be in these different spaces, you're going to pick up different skills. You're going to learn your strengths, and bring that into other spaces. So I think, whatever you have right now that you can do, whether that's art, music, if you're really good on socials, even if you can just make a quick little graphic on Canva, that's great, better than I can do. We need that. So, figure out like where are your strong suits right now, and then how can you show up in different movement spaces and continue building on the skills that you have, or tap into new skills, right? There's always breakout groups. There's always people there that you can connect with. If you want to sharpen, your public speaking skills, go to a couple rallies. And then before you know it, maybe you're having a rally in your neighborhood or in your town where you're speaking to your, the people that are in your immediate sphere of influence, and you're engaging them around a particular topic. So yeah, I think we all have capacities in our skill sets right now. So it's really like, just use those to tap into different movement spaces. You don't really have to do anything new. Just leverage what you have and keep building on that.
Thank you, Ariana. I'm going to just push a little bit because I definitely agree and really appreciate what you shared, Ariana. But I'm curious about if you can think of, in the beginning, I mentioned the capacity that arts communities have. So if you think about it in terms of like capacity support from organizations, if there's anything else that Julia, Nuzat, or Nathan, you can share that you think might be useful in moving your work forward. Not just at the individual level, but as organizational level.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that I've been personally thinking about over the past few years is how how do we make something like voting and democracy, which can be these big abstract issues that people think about once every 4 years, or that people don't think is as urgent as like more human issues. How can we humanize it? How can we package it? How can we create a narrative that makes it personal to different communities, to people, so that when they are thinking about voting, when they're thinking about democracy, it's not just some sort of abstract concept that they're like, oh, like let's go vote at the polls, or voting is bad. But like, what does that mean for our communities? And at the Institute, right, like we are a legal legislative advocacy organization. Our job is to push forward policies and to have much drier and more boring conversations. We don't have within our capacity that particular art component, right? To how we don't have the skill set to really conceive of how do we make voting something that is more human? What's the human story behind this? And I think that's one of the ways in which a lot of different art organizations could be used, could be really helpful, is taking a lot of these different movements and finding the human element of really uplifting it through different artwork, or creating a narrative shift that maybe on the legal side of it we can't really do, but that art communities are much better equipped to do, and that is just as important in these different movement spaces as going to the state house and advocating for policy.
Yeah, thank you. I mentioned their exceptional skills in storytelling, I think could be definitely a way. And I just want to lift up one of the comments because I think it really just reaffirms what Oriana and Nusa just said. It needs to be interwoven into every aspect of their lives. It needs to be accessible and beyond just interesting. It needs to be a requirement that does not feel like a drain they want to escape, which I think is very true. And from a younger perspective, getting kids engaged in schools to vote for things at their school and having it implemented would be really great to get kids more civically minded. I saw that work a lot when I used to teach. Yeah, I think civic education is something that is not part of the curriculum anymore. And, we feel very removed, especially, like new communities in Newark, as you mentioned, news that where people don't feel like their vote matters, that they're so removed from their elected officials that it doesn't make a difference whether or not they vote. So getting them involved at a very, very young age sort of trains that muscle, right? That civic muscle. Um, Julia and Nathan, if you guys want to comment or respond as well to that.
Yeah, I would just say that bringing us into your spaces is really really important rather than like just coming to our spaces.
Mhm.
Of course, like you, if you know I'm looking to be a better LGBT ally or I'm looking for a safe space training, I can maybe call my local LGBT center or my kid can talk to their GSA in their school if they have one. But we're not often the ones with the extended invitation to like come to the PTO meeting or come to a place of worship and talk about we're experiencing. So people feel like they can kind of skip out on having to see us or deal with us or rather than saying, hey, this is my knitting circle that I meet with every other week. I'm going to bring some people in and they're going to chit chat about some of these topics. Bringing us to your circles, whether it's through some of the storytelling lenses that we were just talking about. Like, I think there's been like attempts to do it. Nowadays it's like, okay, here's a TV show about this cast of characters, and one of them is queer, and that's going to be their personality. They're like the token queer one. Or like, here's a story about a trans person, and the story is they're coming out the closet and they're transitioning. We don't get beyond that. We don't get the storyteller of like, here's this really cool superhero who happens to be transgender, or here's like this secret agent who happens to be in a same-sex relationship, or anything like that. So by bringing topics out of these bubbles that people feel they can just kind of push away and just bringing it to the forefront of topics where you might feel like, is this a mismatch? Does this feel kind of like it doesn't belong here? Because that dissonance you're feeling is those hidden biases that we don't want to acknowledge that we have. It's just interwoven in the way that we're socialized throughout our culture. So just by bringing some of these topics, whether it's issues of immigration or issues of different communities of color or people with disabilities, whatever that topic is, bring it out of that bubble and to whatever your audience is, and just start to draw those intersectionalities.
Yeah, thank you, Nathan. Julia, I want to give you the opportunity to respond if you have some thoughts.
Very much. I think I agree with all of you. But yeah, the capacity, I think that we all lack the capacity to talk about the ugly and the bad, and the ability to self-evaluate, and
Mm-hmm.
and when uh, that's what I was talking about voting. I see in our community like they're very apolitical. They
Mm-hmm.
consider themselves apolitical, and when we talk about politics, we're not talking about uh, Republicans, Democrats, or parties, or political parties. We're talking about the relationships that we build and how we construct and we build power. So, in that sense, I would like, the capacity to talk about politics and create our own, agendas as organizations and as community in general. Yeah.
Thank you. I always say everything's political, so I agree with you, Julia. Just want to check on time, Erica. We have about 10, less than 10 minutes.
No, we've got about 20, 22 minutes or so.
Okay, for total, right? But we want to leave some time for.
Oh, yes, total. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to try to wrap up with my questions so then we can open it up to the participants to ask questions of this incredible panel. So I'm going to just kind of switch gears a little bit and ask you more pointedly about artists and cultural organizations. So in your experience or from your perspective, what do artists and cultural organizations often get wrong or get right when they engage in social justice work? Or both? You can speak to both.
Well, one of the things was kind of what I was talking about before about being like, oh, I want to do some type of storytelling or representation of different communities, and you don't dive deeper than just this person's different because of X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm.
It's particularly when it comes, I'm a writer, so I talk a lot specifically from things of like novels and comic books and whatever, and it's like I can respect and I appreciate when there's people in these narratives that reflect me and that I feel like I can see myself in. But a lot of times we get either like these caricatures or we don't dive much deeper into like the humanity of it. And this can happen whether we do like visual art or theater or writing or film. Um, just it's important to address issues, but it's even more important to understand the issues that you're addressing. So I think that they're well intentioned, but before we start to do this, if you're thinking, okay, I want to cast this actor to play this role that they traditionally would not be cast in, like, why are we doing that? What are we bringing to the table? What story are we trying to tell? How are we letting that person have agency over the story that we're telling? Um, who else is involved in making this work? Whether it's like editors or people that are working on the stage or whoever, like, are those people also as diverse as just this like character that you're trying to throw in? Because if we're telling black stories but we're not hiring black directors, that we're not hiring black editors, and we're not hiring black producers, or like, what story are we really telling? So I think anything that we engage in when it's from an artistic lens, yes, absolutely, please continue to say, how can I make this a little bit more diverse? But think about, how can I be more intentionally inclusive beyond just the diversity of it?
Yeah, that's really great, Nathan. I have a pop culture reference that comes to mind immediately. I mean, the current movie that's, in the box office right now, Wuthering Heights, has completely been whitewashed. And it just makes me think about what you just said and taking away from the essence of that story with the casting of the roles. So, yeah, thanks for that. Anyone else?
I think this is something that I have thought about and also sort of experienced as well is this question of how do we take imagery that has been iconic to a movement
Mhm.
and use it purposefully now without making the entire movement about that particular image, right? How do we update iconic imagery to make it more relevant to this time and this moment without disrespecting that original imagery? But also, like, I just think that sometimes within movements, when we are trying to do something visually, perhaps in other mediums as well, we draw on what has worked for years or decades, an image of Martin Luther King Jr. when we're talking about voting rights, right? Like that is iconic for a particular reason, but is that the only image that we can really base our imagery and our campaigns, our artwork off of when we're talking about democracy and voting rights? Or are there other ways in which we can incorporate in new things that are maybe much more relevant to right now, or if not relevant, then at least more timely. I don't know. I think that's something that I think about. Like, how do we draw on past imagery, past artwork, and not disrespect that, but also build off of it rather than just sort of recycling the same sorts of things over and over.
Mm, that's interesting, especially if the goal is also to get younger folks involved and activate the youth. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the youth angle for sure as well right now. And then also thinking about, yeah, I think this is a good opportunity between like social justice work in the different sectors and the arts and cultural community for a lot of just really good like co-development, like really intentional co-development of programming, really thinking about, those iconic images, right? Like maybe it's having an arts and cultural organization that can partner. I'm thinking about like the Underground Railroad Museum in Burlington County, where they have so much information there where you would be surprised how many different historical figures there are, where you don't have to only rely on Martin Luther King, but they can give you that information that's like, oh, here's some other folks that you might want to think about, and here's the cultural influence and why they're so important to thinking about voting rights and pro-democracy movements. So thinking about like the opportunity for co-development, really intentional co-development around programming, um, that centers social justice work. Um, and I'm also thinking, yeah, for the youth, it's so hard sometimes to pull them in because they're all over the place. They have so many different interests, but it's not impossible. So I'm even thinking about like, especially in our overburdened communities that we service at NJEJA, where a lot of our students and youth don't have access to arts programs, period. So they don't even know what that looks like to really dream in a way that is can turn into something that is programmatic and more people can see it, but they have amazing art skills, graphic design, drawing, architecture skills that they've just learned on their own. And so thinking about ways that, we can really invest in them also being a part of this like programmatic co-development, I think would be really interesting to explore. Because even though they don't have the traditional investment that you might see in other more affluent communities, they do still have those skills, they do still have those dreams and passions. So figuring out how do we be really intentional with including them in all of this, I think would be a really fun project to figure out. And also just push the boundaries and the dynamic a little bit around, who's kind of at the table when we're talking about arts and cultural organizations and who's helping to really drive these narratives. And it tends to not be the people who look like us on this panel, right? So thinking about how do we get more folks like us at the table in a really intentional way.
Great. Thank you, Rhian. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think creating these spaces and a space where like more spaces where people can practice or get introduced to different types of arts. It would be very helpful. The problem that we have, well, we actually lucky in labor when we practice theater because we have a big space in the church. And the first thing when I came to New Labor that I saw was that big space. And the first thing that I proposed is that I wanted to do theater, because we have the space. And since I was a student, that's the problem that I found, that there's no like public spaces where you can, practice this type of arts, or the arts are considered for people who's educated, who go to university, and even the workers have this conception that because they didn't start from the beginning since they were little, so they don't have the opportunity to practice it, and that's something very powerful about leader of the press. When you come to these spaces that is working adults, that most of them just didn't finish uh, they didn't have the opportunity to finish school, like they get into middle school or first grade, and you like let them, give them the space, and they imagine themselves as actors. That's very transformative. So I think we need more spaces, that give this space to question ourselves, to question, because we see theater as um, uh, um, a place and a personal space to do questions, like uncomfortable questions, and that's the only thing that makes us like see reality and create new things. So I think that's what will be very helpful. Have more spaces to do art, because that's arts are the way like humans connect with the reality of the others without bias.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that that's sort of the impetus and the driving force behind this group coming together and New Jersey Theater Alliance seeing the power of that. There's an interesting comment just to kind of, you know, um, validate what Julia shared, that there are almost no third spaces that are just easy to get to, especially in South Jersey's public transportation desert. And that doesn't cost anything to participate in. But again, it allows people to try, this transformative power of the arts to really kind of share our shared humanity, see themselves in stories. Um, so it's definitely an under-resourced, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? A thing that we could benefit from that is unfortunately not available. Um, Okay, so I have two more questions, but I'm gonna ask one and then I'll save the other one in case there are no questions, but I imagine there are some questions from our audience. If someone in this room wants to get involved or support your work, what's the first step that they can take? I want to leave them with some practical, actionable steps.
So the easiest way is really to go to our website, which is transequitycoalition.org. Um, there is an absolute treasure trove of information there that is meant to be shared. If you think in your head, like, I don't know anybody who's trans, you are wrong. But also, somebody who knows somebody will. Um, there's everything from a free resource list on our website. It covers everything from legal help, doctors, therapists, social spaces, barbers, whatever folks need. Um, Getting the word out for resources like that is something that can save somebody's life. If they just have one space where they can be themselves, that is wildly important. Um, on the website, it's also a way to connect with us. Again, going back to what I was saying earlier about bringing us into different spaces, um, the easiest way to do that is to connect with us. If you're thinking, you know what, I would love to hear more about this, and I want X group that I belong to also learn about this, you reach out to us and we can tailor content to any learning level. We've done things from the basics of just what is a pronoun, why is it important, to like deep gender theory, hard hitting conversations. Um, and it can be tailored to medical professionals, religious leaders, parents, children, um, everybody. So just, I would say take 10 minutes of your day one time to go to our website and just click around. Meet some of the team, look at some of the resources that we have. So come to an event that we're going to be hosting and just say, you know what, I just want to hold space for a minute and just kind of sit and observe and learn something new today. Just being intentional about taking that little bit of time out of your day to learn a little bit of something about uh, a topic you might not explore every day, or a group of people that you might think, I don't think I know anybody who belongs to this group of people. Um, I think you'll really be pleasantly surprised at all you can learn. And 9 times out of 10, when people do that, they end up getting involved. They're just like, what do you need? Do you need somebody to stand at a table at Pride? Do you need me to talk to my friends about donating toiletry packages for people who need it? Do you need me like to do a fundraiser or whatever? There's so many ways to get involved. So just take a little bit and not just for our organization, but just all of the organizations that are being represented here. Just go to the website, click around, learn a little bit, and see if about reaching out. Just take that brave step, and I think you're going to have a lot of really excellent connections that will come out of it.
Thank you, Nathan.
I'll definitely plus one to all of that. Appreciate Erica for putting all the websites in the chat for everyone. We also have tons of resources on the NJEJA website, everything from the environmental justice law, the rulemaking process, what does that mean for our state, to just a basic primer on air pollution. What does that mean? What does that look like in your community? What are the different pollutants you need to know and how they impact your body? To very technical, in the weeds policy jargon. You probably won't want to spend too much time on it, but it's there if you're just really curious about, what federal tax credits are moving right now around incineration. Really, really technical things. But I did put a link in the chat too to two events that we have coming up. One is in March on the 24th, so about a month away. It's a waste justice listening session that we're doing with the Ironbound Community Corporation. And that's particularly around incineration, but really thinking about the ways in which waste infrastructure impacts all of New Jersey. And the reason why we're doing it in Newark is because the largest incinerator in the state is there, and most of our trash goes there. And so having a really deep conversation around what does that look like for both us folks who are outside of Newark, but we're disposing of our waste, and then the people who live in the Ironbound community who are on the receiving end of all of that. And what does that look like? Full life cycle of waste justice. And then we also are doing an AI webinar in April with some community folks that we're working with across the state. And it's really just a download on everything you need to know about data center development and what's coming. So those are two immediate opportunities to get involved with us. And I'll put my email in the chat as well. So if you have anything specific or you want to do a workshop, a training, like Nathan was saying, we do it all, and we can tailor it to just about any audience, whether you're teaching, if it's for the arts, if it's something you want to do with your community, and we can do just about any topic. So I'll put my email in the chat if you want to reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation.
Thank you, Ariana. Julia and Nuza, I know we have about 9 minutes, and I'm just going to ask you to keep it as brief as possible so we have a chance to listen from our audience. Possible.
Go ahead, Julia.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, no, we have a lot of things. We have like train the trainers. We also have many events this March. We will have like all the Sundays of March. We're gonna have an event starting from the 8th of March. We usually do the International Women's March on Ferry Street. That will be at 4 p.m. So we always we try to do this every year and connect the march with the situations or the things that are happening at this moment. So we're trying to connect this narrative to the eyes out of New Jersey and how this is affecting women in our community. We also have the 15th of March, we'll have a film forum. So we're gonna talk about domestic workers because that's one of our campaigns. The domestic workers are going to show a movie and talk about it too, like from their perspective as domestic here. And also we're gonna have a forum theater on the 22nd that's gonna be about domestic workers too. So you're invited to that, to volunteer or to enjoy us, practicing and playing and imagining all the realities. Like we always need help in anything as Nathan said. So you can go visit us, just sit and talk and drink a coffee, and then you will get involved in everything because we have a lot of work to do.
Very true. Thank you, Julia. Is that?
I will just quickly uplift. Yes, the Institute has a listserv that you can join if you go to the website. Our website contains all of our reports, which is great, but also a lot of different opportunities to get involved if you do have the capacity to do so. We always appreciate if folks show up at the State House for any events that we have. There are different policies that we are uplifting. If you call, email your legislators, that's very important, helpful. We have a volunteer program that I believe is on our website as well. Very helpful to join that way. The one thing I'll uplift since I put it in the chat is the Institute does have a campaign to lower the voting age to 16 and 17-year-olds in municipal and school board elections. So if you are involved very much in your town or municipality, or you have a young person who is involved as well or would like to lower the voting age in that town or municipality, please do reach out. We are very much trying to expand that effort and we would love to bring it to whatever town you live in.
Thank you, Nuza. And I just want a quick shout out. If you want to learn more about the work that the Institute in particular is doing around reparations, Gathering Ground is hosting a briefing with the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice this afternoon. I know it's a lot to ask to sit through two webinars, but we are going to be talking about how people can support the reparations report and the policies that come from the reparations report today at 2:30. And I can put the link in the chat for registration. So we only have a few minutes left, so I apologize. I know I'd love to turn it over to anyone who has questions for all our panelists or one of our panelists. Please raise your hand and we can get to you. And Erica, I think you can help with that since I can't see everybody, or if you want to put it in the chat, if you prefer not to ask directly, we can certainly assist with that.
I don't think I'll be able to see your physical hands, but I think if you use the little hand raise function, it'll pop you over to the beside where I can see you.
Yeah.
Quiet group.
Well, we got some love from Alexis, so thanks for that, Alexis. We appreciate your comment in the chat.
Questions?
No questions, just appreciating. I mean, we could stop or part on a positive note and ask the panel if there are no questions, what gives you hope right now in your work? Spaces like this give me personally a lot of hope, understanding the commonalities and the common ground that we all have and share, and of course our shared humanity. So I'll just share that, but I'd love to hear if there's any hope right now in these darker times, especially.
I've been finding some silver lining in since the presidential election. I've had the most out of all my time in doing advocacy. Um, the people that have been on the sidelines and on the bench are like finally mad enough to get off the sidelines and like start tapping in and being like, I'm really pissed off. What can I do? How can I help? Um, and it's like they say like that was the best time to do it. The second best time is now. So, we can't sit there and say, well, where were you when, we can have those conversations and they are important conversations. But in the here and now, getting people out of their chairs and off the sidelines and like get into the game, there's been a lot of that since the amount of executive orders and anti-trans legislation that has been coming down the pike. I think that's it really does give me hope that there are people who are paying attention. A lot of people who are not trans themselves are finally getting in the fight and just saying, you know what, I'm tired of seeing this. I'm tired of misinformation. I'm tired of fear mongering and like demonization of this tiny demographic of people that were like, what did we even do? And just if that resonates with you, if you feel like, man, I've been sitting pretty comfortable lately and I've not been too deeply involved in a lot of stuff, this is your sign from the universe. Get off the sidelines, get involved. It doesn't matter what way you do it. If it's a donation, if you're rallying in the streets, if you're voting, if you're educating, talking about it, just don't do nothing. Just do something. The people who are doing something have been able to give me my hope back and reignite my spark. And you'll be able to do that for other people too.
Thank you, Nathan. What's a hope?
One thing that has been really gratifying to see over the course of our Vote 16 work is just how smart and passionate and involved young folks are. I think that for years and years, people have said, "Oh, young folks are not engaged, they're apathetic, like they're not, old enough to vote, whatever it might be." And all of that is just so not true. Over the course of our work, we've worked with a lot of young people who want to lower the voting age in their school board or their municipality because they want a voice in the government. They have things to say, they're paying attention, they're showing up to rallies, they're really invested in the different organizations that are represented here or the different movements that are happening. And so that is one thing that really gives me hope is that young folks are there. They are so much smarter and they have so many more resources than we ever had. And I think we can't forget them as like bad things are happening, but like the young folk are so resilient. And so we don't have any excuse to not also be so.
Yeah. Thank you, Nizat. Leah, we're a little over time, but I want to give you a chance to definitely, what's one thing that gives you hope right now in your work?
Yes, as I said, Nathan, really in our community, we're talking every time, like every day about being afraid and not afraid of, like just open your door. Maybe you're gonna see something that is gonna ruin your life, but seeing like young people jumping out, and speaking out, that gives me hope. And I think in times of darkness, it's the precise moment to organize.
Mhm.
So, and I think that the people had that intuition, and we're seeing people trying to organize. So that gives me a lot of hope. Mhm.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think social justice work is definitely strengthened by the connective tissue we build across the sectors, across our communities, across differences. And I think what we learned today is that we need to listen deeply, show up with no agenda, is what I definitely heard from you all, and continue nurturing those relationships that are formed so that they're really reflective of the community and not the needs that you want to impart. So I want to thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for engaging in this meaningful conversations. I certainly learned a lot about what each of you do and how we can support the work that you do. And I'll turn it over to Erica for some final thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Maria. Thank you to all of the panelists. This is a great conversation. I feel um, hopeful also about how much interest there was from the arts community in this conversation. The way that these incredible panelists all said yes right away because they see the value and the power and the potential for these kinds of intersections. I feel hopeful that hopefully we sparked some new ways to partner and all work together to build the world that we want to build. So all of you in this room certainly make me feel hopeful.
That's
And just a huge thank you. Our next Creating Change virtual event will be with Bliss Griffin, who, if you've engaged with her, she's a fantastic facilitator. All of that is on our website. It's going to be a two-part series, one about intentional culture, building intentional culture within your organization and how that intersects with justice work. And then the second part will get even a little bit more into the weeds around like policies and procedures and kind of crystallizing those things that you want to build within your intentional culture. And again, that came directly out of the summit in the fall and what people were asking for. So hope to see all of you there. Great. Thank you. Much love to you all and more to come. Thank you, thank you, thank you, panelists. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone.